The perfect modern AK LARPing platform for the popular front-watching, terminally online doomer coming up. What is up, guys? My name is John with PewPewTactical.com, your definitive source for gun reviews, gear guides, and all things that go... Where is it? Can't see it. Where is it? When it comes to American-made AKs, we're pretty comfortable with saying that Palmetto State Armory's Gen 3 AKMs are some of the best when it comes to nailing that sweet spot of cost and reliability. And given that they just released a whole slew of different AK-74 configurations, we would hazard a guess that someone in the engineering department at PSA is probably pretty close to the same flavor of AK nerd that we are. And the AK-103 just being released probably confirms that. The original Russian AK-103 occupies a pretty specific niche, being that the gun is essentially still an AKM that's been given a modernization treatment and now sports all of the newer features found on the AK-74M series, such as the black polymer furniture, optics dovetail rail on the side of the receiver, side-folding full polymer stock, and the iconic AK-74 type muzzle brake up front. The process results in a rifle that's a few pounds lighter than the standard AKM, while still being chambered in 7.62x39. And despite the Russian military's swap over to the faster 5.45x39 round with the adoption of the AK-74, the AK-103 and its slightly shorter carbine variant, the AK-104, were still appearing in the hands of Russia's premier counter-terror units well into the late 2000s. There's a whole lot of internet speculation as to why exactly that is, and a reasonable explanation might be that 7.62x39 is much better at punching through hard cover as compared to 5.45, whereas 5.45 offers better penetration of ceramic armor in its AP variants, but its inherent tumbling property when striking a hard surface makes it not quite as lethal when encountering sheetrock, wood, so on. Whether or not that's accurate, who knows? It's kind of just a guessing game made up of a bunch of internet detectives that are not really privy to any special information that you and I are not, but it seems reasonable at least on its face. Those of you who track small arms conflict type stuff might also recognize the AK-103 as being one of the increasingly common rifles that show up in black markets the world over, especially throughout Syria and Yemen, as it's one of the most internationally exported firearms that Russia makes domestically, and it just so happens to have a strange habit of routinely falling off of trucks before being offered for sale by someone's Iraqi uncle on a Telegram channel. Now, obviously all of that has very little bearing on the actual PSA AK-103, except for the fact that it's a really specific gun to even go through the hassle of replicating, so I figured a little bit of context might be cool. Now, I'm going to offer the same kind of disclaimers here as I did with our previous AK-74 in saying that obviously, if you're the type of gun nerd that can tell me exactly what years Izmash produced, what rifles with ribbed versus smooth dust covers, you can probably safely move on, as this gun is obviously no match for someone of your power level, and I suspect that the minor inaccuracies will probably drive you insane. If, however, you're kinda in the same mindset as me, where you can appreciate a gun that's maybe not a full-on clone, but makes a pretty good effort at least visually or aesthetically appearing pretty similar to its namesake, then you have my thanks for not being completely insufferable. With all of that out of the way, we had a chance to get some time in with PSA's AK-103 a while back out in Las Vegas, and while yes, a lot of what's going on here is cosmetic, there are some pretty neat features under the hood that lend to a more enjoyable shooting experience as compared to other AK platforms. From front to back, probably the first thing that you're going to notice visually is that huge AK-74 style muzzle brake right up front, which features two large ports off to either side and a series of vent holes at various angles up top that utilize escaping gases to mitigate muzzle climb. And it actually does a surprisingly good job even on that larger 7.62x39 round. If you've watched my review of the AK-74, I was geeking out a bit about how non-existent the recoil felt with 5.45, and although the jump up to 7.62 is obviously going to incur a recoil debuff, that muzzle brake feels to me like it's doing a hell of a job. The 103's recoil impulse is much less violent than you'd expect if you've spent any amount of time firing musty-ass old AKs. And while it's still mildly unpleasant for anyone unfortunate enough to be adjacent to you, the performance increase is quite welcome. A bit further back and you're gonna notice that the gun actually has the 90-degree gas block that's also found on the AK-74M. And while the 90-degree gas blocks were originally implemented as a way to mitigate bullet shearing that was happening with high-velocity 5.45, retroactively they actually found that it worked really well with 7.62x39 as well, and prolonged the life of the barrel and mitigated fouling. The gun's stock iron sights are just standard AK territory here, with a rear sight that's adjustable for elevation and a matching AK-74 style front base up front. One of the gun's bigger selling points for a lot of folks is the inclusion of an FN Herstal cold hammer forged chrome-lined barrel, which at this particular point in time appears to be a PSA exclusive. Comprised of chrome molybdenum steel, or what FN dubs machine gun steel, for its use in the M249 and M240, the barrel's got a 1 in 9.45 inch twist rate and standard 14x1 left-handed threads. Now, I'm not going to claim to be any kind of expert on AK barrel metallurgy or anything like that, but we were getting easy, repeated hits on 300-yard steel with super shitball Tula Steelcase 7.62x39 with an unmagnified optic. So, I assume that the folks smarter than I are right to be excited about that FN barrel. Like I mentioned, the gun's sporting some sleek, black polymer furniture typical of AK-100 series rifles, and it works about as well as you'd expect stock AK handguards to work. Which is to say, just be incredibly careful about your hand placement when you're burning through ammo quickly, because if you index your support hand poorly, you're gonna burn the shit out of it on that metal handguard retaining cap. Ask me how I know. We tossed a Midwest Industries Picatinny dovetail mount on the gun with an older EOTech 5.52, and even the super simple setup was a blast to run and an immediate improvement over AK irons. As with any time you mount an optic on an AK, you're gonna be jumping into weird quasi-chin weld territory, just given the dimensions of the stock and all that, but it's not too bad once you get used to it. Once acclimated to the beefier recoil of 7.62x39 jumping through my jawbones, the setup allowed for the quick target acquisition and fast follow-up shots one would expect, even if it is mildly jarring at first. The 103 utilizes PSA's standard single-stage AK trigger, and it runs great for what it is. AKs, in my experience, tend to have a very different feeling trigger as compared to most AR-15s, in that there's very little take-up before you hit a very small wall, then a quite sudden break that honestly might catch you off guard if you're not used to it. Personal preference stuff here, but I quite like them, and I found it natural feeling, especially coming right off the AK-74 I was shooting immediately beforehand. In theory, the PSA 103 should be compatible with most 7.62x39 magazines currently out there, but as always, if you start introducing weirder stuff, there's always the chance that it just might not vibe. We were using Gen 2 PMags for the duration of our time with the gun, and outside of one mag, which appeared to have a dicked up follower that wasn't actually doing the thing where it puts cartridges in the chamber, everything ran and fit together just fine. Lastly, our particular model was the quote-unquote correct AK-74M style side-folding full polymer stock, which is activated by a small button on the left side of the receiver and locks into place via a small latch just above the magazine well. It's worth noting that the stock is not going to fold or lock into place if you've got an optic mounted on that dovetail rail, and realistically, that folding feature is more for storage than anything else, but it is still cool to see it replicated if you're gonna be a stickler for details. If you don't particularly care about that folding stock, there is a full stock version available, which, I get it, but it also seems kind of weird to kind of be like 90% of a correct, almost maybe clone gun, but you just give up at the end? Farb. So overall, is the PSA AK-103 worth snagging? In this nerd's humble opinion, if you're already thinking about picking up an American-made AK, but aren't looking at Arsenal and the like, and yes, I know Arsenal's not technically American-made, I think there's probably good cause to bump the 103 up to the top of your wish list, especially with that FN Herstal barrel included as part of the package. That being said, the things that I find cool about this gun are admittedly really niche features. being that it's a visually passable clone of an already kind of niche AK variant. But if you made it to this point in the video and were able to follow the useless factoids at the beginning, I'd imagine you're probably also this gun's target demographic, and I'd recommend you give it a hearty considering. Alright guys, that's gonna do it for us today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the content, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel, as we've got lots more small micro-conflict trivia on the way. Once again, my name is John with Pew Pew Tactical. We've got shirts down in the description below, and we will see you next time.